Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. I will be disturbing the sounds of silence this evening, as frankly I've had enough of the bullshit, and after what happened with my dad recently and some recent podcasts elsewhere, and then throw in the frankly awful show that I had to do on Tuesday, enough is enough. And we need to get back to realistic and on track. It's been a strange week in so many ways. I wrote 3 shows this week alone. One we had on Tuesday, another before next Thursday. We had a We're All Going to Die piece on another show this week, and biblical level extinction events we heard. Team Trump took a bashing which was long overdue. The battle of the pensioners all played out on national TV between Trump and Biden, where not surprisingly debates on policies and helping the people were thin on the ground. The fact that Trump apparently lost a debate to Biden is a national embarrassment, because if the alternative is Biden, Americans, you have lost your collective minds. Biden is a puppet to get Pelosi in charge. Wake up. Trump is the lesser of two evils again. When will the public see through this illusion and pick their own candidates? Israel carried on being Israel. The media carried on being treasonous and liars. The medical people carried on imitating Drake of contradicting my contradictions. NASA carried on warning we're all going to die via asteroids. And BLM carried on caring for blacks only. Meanwhile, 200,000 children carried on dying this week from preventable causes. We found out that the US Army facilities, including Gitmo, are running adrenochrome harvesting on children aged 3 to 13. But despite all that, we were then assured that the modern-day Moses called Tank will lead the rebellion and us all to the promised land. And so all our fears subsided, did they not? No? Oh well. As John Lennon said a long time ago, and that still reigns today, and that is our responsibility to fix it. Our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. I think we're being run by maniacs for maniacal ends, and I think I'm liable to be put away as insane for expressing that. That's what's insane about it. Right, there'll be a lot of backs against the wall after this show. So, 2 years ago, early this month, we outed a major expose that had barely been covered within the mainstream media. In fact, it hadn't. And the alt media, not too much either. That was 2 years ago. And that expose was about NXIVM. And it was not until the following February before it became a national topic, and yesterday brought some justice to that matter. US heiress Claire Bronfman has been sentenced to 6 years and 9 months in prison for her role in the NXIVM sex trafficking group. Bronfman, who is heir to the Seagram liquor fortune and a benefactor of NXIVM leader Keith Raniere, pleaded guilty back in April 2019 to harbouring migrants for unpaid labour and services, and she also admitted to credit card fraud. Now, she was taken into custody to begin her jail term immediately after sentencing in Brooklyn, New York. But writing to the court last month, Bronfman said she never meant to hurt anyone. However, I have, and for this I'm deeply sorry. However, she said NXIVM had greatly changed my life for the better, oh dear, and that she wouldn't denounce its leader Ranieri. Mind control, anyone? NXIVM started in 1998 as a self-help program. It said it worked with more than 16,000 people, and the trial that was held last year and the sentencing recently heard that NXIVM had operated like a cult. Now, prosecutors told the court that members formed a secret sorority of brainwashed slaves who were branded with Ranieri's initials and forced to have sex with him. For those of you who don't remember, these women who had to join NXIVM had to take all their clothes off, and he had to take pictures of them, and then his initials was branded next to their genitals, and then he demanded sex, and these people went along with it. Some culpability there. Now, Bronfman was on NXIVM's executive board and gave Ranieri tens of millions of dollars to run the group's intensive self-improvement classes, and she also paid for the group's lawyers when a lawsuit was filed against them. And counsel acting for Bronfman argued that she should be given a lenient sentence because she wasn't directly involved in the most serious allegations against NXIVM. However, prosecutors said she should be given a serious punishment because Ranieri would not have been able to commit the crimes with which he was convicted were it not for powerful allies like Bronfman. Good stuff. JP Morgan have been found out this week, and they've agreed to pay $920 million in connection with schemes to defraud precious metals and US Treasury markets. JP Morgan Chase, a New York global-based banking and financial services firm, has entered into a resolution with the Department of Justice this week to resolve criminal charges related to two distinct schemes to defraud the people. The first involving tens of thousands of episodes of unlawful trading in the markets for precious metals futures contracts, and the second involving thousands of episodes of unlawful trading in the markets for US Treasury futures contracts and the secondary cash market for US Treasury notes and bonds. One has to ask here why Mr. Mnuchin was not brought into question, given the latter two were to do with the US Treasury. But there you go. Now, JP Morgan entered into a deferred prosecution agreement in connection with the criminal information that was filed today in the District of Connecticut, charging the company with 2 counts of wire fraud. And under the terms of the DPA, JP Morgan will pay over $920 million in criminal monetary penalty, criminal disgorgement, and victim compensation, with the criminal monetary penalty credited against payments made to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission under a separate agreement with the CFTC that was being announced yesterday, and with part of the criminal disgorgements credited against payments made to the Securities Exchange Commission under a separate agreement with the SEC that was also announced yesterday. Now, over the 8 years, traders on JP Morgan's precious metals and US Treasury desks engaged in separate schemes to defraud other market participants that involve thousands of instances of unlawful trading meant to enhance profits and avoid losses, according to the Acting Assistant Attorney General Brian C. Rabbit of the Justice Department's Criminal Division. And he said today's resolution, which includes a significant criminal monetary penalty and compensation for victims and requires JP Morgan to disgorge its unlawful gains, reflects the nature and seriousness of the bank's offences and represents a milestone in the department's ongoing efforts to ensure the integrity of public markets critical to our financial system. A research and development lab of the Chinese tech giant Huawei Technologies in the southern city of Dongguan has caught fire. Well, I never. Producing large clouds of thick grey smoke the other day, and some of the locals caught the incident on camera before it was shut down. Now, the videos show plumes of smoke coming from the building's top floors and largely obscuring the sky above the facility. And according to the local fire department, the flammable sound-absorbing cotton which the facility was using may be the main source of the blaze. Coincidence? I think not. I received a message last week that said, I thought you might find this interesting. And the person wrote, my dad has found thousands of unopened ballots at a garbage dump in Petaluma in California, north of San Francisco. Interesting story. And the piece we put out about 2 months ago now will make a lot more sense now. The piece we put out about 2 months ago, and the reason they are unopened is the result is on the outside of the envelope with a barcode. Oops. This is cheating on a massive scale. And Trump needs to cancel the election now and fix this country before any ridiculous election unfolds. It's not going to be fair. It never has been fair in history. It's just worse now. With all the conditions ongoing, how can you possibly have a fair election? It's just beyond all imagination. Cancel it. Neither politician is fit to run this country, in my opinion. And clearly in the trustees' opinion this week as well. That's a massive change. But off to the UK, and fairly disturbing report coming out of undercover informants working for the police and MI5, the latter of which runs the BBC and Sky and the UK government, are going to be explicitly permitted for the first time under British law to commit crimes. Yes, you heard that correct. The unprecedented legislation to authorise and oversee crimes comes after years of unclear rules over when these agents can break the law. The law will not specify exactly which crimes can be committed. Plausible deniability again, but like vaccine companies. And critics are urging MPs to amend the proposed law to rule out murder and serious violence. Now, the highly unusual decision to create a law that sanctions crime comes after a legal battle to force MI5 and the government to reveal secret rules governing when an informant can break the law. Informants, also known as agents, are recruited to gather intelligence on targets, including terrorist organisations, major drug gangs and child abuse networks, and also radio show hosts. Just saying. Now, these agents are often already involved in the networks being targeted and need to maintain a cover in order to gather critical evidence for the investigators. And under the legislation going before Parliament today, MI5, the police, the National Crime Agency and other agencies that use informants or undercover agents will be able to explicitly authorise them to commit a specific crime as part of an operation. Now, the law will require MI5 officers and others to show the crime is necessary and proportionate. Yeah. All under Jewish law. I don't think that is going to apply, I'm sorry. While the Security Services Watchdog, a senior judge, will report on how the power is used, and there will be no role for the Crown Prosecution Service in reviewing the crimes. Oh dear. So there's no oversight again. So which agencies will be able to authorise secret crimes? The early ones you will expect, the later ones will aghast you. MI5 and other intelligence bodies, police forces and the National Crime Agency, immigration and border officers, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs agents, Serious Fraud Office, UK Military Forces, Ministry of Justice, Competition and Markets Authority, the Environment Agency, Financial Conduct Authority, the Food Agency Standards. The Food Standards Agency are allowed to commit crimes. The Gambling Commission and Medicines and Healthcare Regulation Authorities as well. That does not augur well. MI5 and intelligence plus occasionally the police maybe. But what does the rest of them included in that report require that level of authority for? Is the big question. This week in America, a number of police departments around the United States have reported that their 9/11 services are down. A widespread outage believed to be linked to a glitch in Microsoft cloud computing platform Azure. I guess Gates is too busy killing people to fix that. And police and sheriff's departments in at least Minnesota, Arizona, California, Nevada, North Carolina and Pennsylvania. I wonder which state Pennsylvania's in. Hello to the Walmart assistant who said that to me. Have noted issues with their emergency call systems on Monday, directing residents to use alternative numbers while they work to correct the issue. And it was allegedly caused by a technical failure in Microsoft's Azure cloud. But no official explanation has yet been offered for the outages in any of the affected locations. Now, there was a report put out in Minneapolis, and the police, fire and emergency gave an alternative number and said, we will advise you when this is fixed. To me, it sounds like they are testing something. The key is, testing for what? Next, the top-ranked Democrat, the unspeaking Speaker of the House, has called President Donald Trump's alleged tax avoidance a question of National security. Oh my, that word again. Pelosi asked whether Mr. Trump owed money to foreign interests following an article on his financial records by the New York Times. And it alleges Mr. Trump only paid $750 in federal income tax in both 2016 and 2017. But Trump called the report fake news. Now, speaking on NBC, or trying to speak on NBC, Pelosi said the report showed that this president appears to have over $400 million in debt. To whom, she said? Different countries. What is the leverage they have, she asked, adding, so for me, this is a national security question. The fact that you could have a sitting president who owes hundreds of millions of dollars that he's personally guaranteed to lenders, and we don't know who these lenders are, she said, and suggested that Mr. Trump may be indebted to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Oh, the Russian collusion comes up again. Despite a report today that Hillary Clinton made that all up to cover up her own Russian collusion. There you go. Now, the lenders were Rothschilds, Pelosi. They bailed him out 4 of the 6 times he declared fake bankruptcy. But tax details are national security. Oh dear. Fine, Pelosi. If they are, then you and every other politician won't mind showing all your bank accounts to the general public, because I think we would then have a real national security issue if they were all revealed. We're going to go into categories now before a music break, and the first one is the Middle East. US Special Operations Forces with no fanfare claimed this week to have killed a top Al-Qaeda leader in northwest Syria in an unusual drone strike nearly 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks? Real? And they used their secretive weapon, a so-called Ninja Hellfire missile, on which the explosive warhead is replaced by long blades to crush or slice its victim while minimizing risks to any civilians nearby. And it was the second time in 3 months that American commandos have killed a senior Qaeda leader in northwest Syria with these specially designed missiles. Now, the strike illustrated the complexities of carrying out operations against terrorist groups in a part of the world where the United States and Russia have been warring and pursuing their own objectives and coming into conflict. Now, the recent ramming of an American ground patrol by a Russian armoured vehicle escalated tensions between the two rival powers in northeast Syria. Now, the clash prompted the Pentagon last week to dispatch Bradley fighting vehicles and more fighter jet patrols to reinforce more than 500 American troops, helping stamp out remnants of the Islamic State there. But in an opposite corner of the country, where the United States has no troops on the ground, the military's secretive Joint Special Operations Command, with help from the CIA, is carrying out a shadow war against different terrorist threats. A small but virulent Al-Qaeda affiliate that American officials say is plotting attacks against the West. And if you believe that 20 years after that first lie, you'll believe anything. Now, the Pentagon will not say much about the latest Reaper drone strike in northwest Syria, and on it goes. I thought Trump said Al-Qaeda and ISIS were defeated and that we were bringing troops home many months back. It may even been last year. Or was that just an alternate timeline? And does anyone ask why a supposed intelligence agency is in combat mode in other countries? Perhaps we'll find out in the next story, also from Syria. Northeastern Syria, home to the vast majority of the country's oil, is also where most US troops in the country are concentrated. Damascus has repeatedly accused US forces and their Kurdish allies of stealing the nation's oil, with intelligence confirming the shipment of tens of millions of dollars of black gold out of the country every month. A convoy of 35 tanker trucks from the Jazeera region of northeast Syria has made its way out of the country into northern Iraq, according to the Syrian Arab news agency. The convoy reportedly left Hasaka province on Wednesday evening. Now, the US has been strengthening its presence in Syria in recent weeks, despite promises by President Trump to withdraw from the war-torn country late last year. There you go. And last week, US officials and Syrian media reported the delivery of additional troops and vehicles into the country from neighbouring Iraq. Last year, Russian military intelligence released a report on US oil smuggling activities in Syria, revealing that the Pentagon, the CIA, private military contractors, which are also CIA, and Kurdish militias were engaged in the illegal shipment of more than $30 million worth of Syrian oil out of the war-torn country each month. $30 million of oil per month. So now you know why the CIA are there. Now, before the start of its foreign-backed civil conflict in 2011, Syria produced about 400,000 barrels of oil per day, which was enough to provide the country with energy self-sufficiency, which is a major problem to the bullies and clowns, and up to 20% of the state's revenues. Now, production dropped dramatically during the war. Syria and its allies see the return of the nation's energy resources as a crucial requirement for rebuilding the country from the estimated $200 to $400 billion in damage that has been caused during the conflict. Of course, that 200 to 400 billion in damage, once the CIA install their puppet in Syria, is then provided by the American people for the likes of the CIA private contractors, Halliburton and Bechtel, to go and rebuild it. That make any sense? Either. Now, President Trump has repeatedly pledged to take and keep Syria's oil and to prevent it from falling into the hands of either terrorists or the Syrian government. Trump's words. But who made Trump the decider of where another country's oil should go? And the big question is he a CIA puppet? Can you imagine the uproar if Putin or Xi said the oil out of America is not allowed to go to the country's government? We'd have World War III. And why is our government getting involved and stealing other countries' oil, like in Iraq. They've tried to do it to Iran, they did it to Kuwait, now Syria. Now, in related news, residents of the village of Tal Sateh took to the streets in Qam Ishli countryside on Thursday, carrying national flags, portraits of Syria's president, and signs demanding that both Turkish and Zionist US occupation forces withdraw from the region immediately and stop plundering their land, oil, and also wheat resources. This is related and connected. The newly formed US Space Force is deploying troops to a vast new frontier, now the Arabian Peninsula. The Space Force now has a squadron of 20 airmen stationed at Qatar's Al Udeid air base in its first foreign deployment. The force, pushed by Donald Trump, represents the sixth branch of the US military and the first new military service since the creation of the Air Force in 1947. Which just coincides with the Roswell and Aztec crashes, does it not? And it has provoked skepticism in Congress, satire on Netflix, and also its uncannily similar logo, Star Trek jokes about intergalactic battles. Now, future wars, the article said, may be waged in outer space, but the Arabian Desert already saw what military experts dubbed the world's first space war, the 1991 Desert Storm operation, to drive Iraqi forces from Kuwait. Maybe that's a hint they were using more exotic vehicles as far back as 1991. Today, the US faces new threats in the region from, here we go, Iran's missile program and efforts to jam, hack and blind satellites. And it says we're starting to see other nations that are extremely aggressive in preparing to extend conflict into space, according to Colonel Todd Benson, who is the director of Space Force troops at Al Udeid. And he said we have to be able to compete and defend and protect all of our national interests. In Arabia, your national interests are in this country, Mr. Benson, not everywhere else. So, in a swearing-in ceremony earlier this month, the 20 Air Force troops, flanked by American flags, which are actually designed by Brits, sorry, just saying, and massive satellites, entered Space Force. Soon several more will join the unit of core space operators who will run satellites, track enemy manoeuvres and try to avert conflicts in space. Now, Benson declined to name the aggressive nations his airmen will monitor and potentially combat. Iran, but the decision to deploy Space Force personnel follows months of escalating tensions between the US and Iran. And it says hostilities between the two countries ignited by Trump's unilateral withdrawal of the US from Iran's nuclear accord. Perhaps he withdrew that because he already knows, well, he's been told, the trustee told him, that Israel sold nuclear weapons to Iran in the 1980s and 1990s. And no one wants to talk about it. And it all came to a head in January when US forces killed a top Iranian general. Iran responded by launching ballistic missiles at American soldiers in Iraq. And this spring, Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard launched its first satellite into space, revealing what experts describe as a secret military space program. But apparently other countries are not allowed to do that. Only America, it seems. Does anyone else think that's wrong? What they're saying here is Iran is not allowed to defend itself. But when you're in Iran and you've seen US forces along with the intelligence agencies ransack Kuwait, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, southern Turkey and various other countries in the region, wouldn't you want to defend? And let's go the other side of Iran. Afghanistan. Go and check out where Qatar is and its location to Iran, and then wonder why the Iranians are concerned. But the point is, this is not an American war with Iran. This is Israel and the Hebrew Anunnaki program. Iran means the land of the Aryans. And this is the modern day version of attacking this and every other country housing Aryans and Rus as far back as 110,000 years ago. Fact. And this Space Force is what the recent agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates was all about. More bases to attack Iran. And yet the world sits back and watches. First Iran, the next will be America. That's never going to happen. We've got the greatest military. You may laugh, but Israel Cohen warned you of it in 1912. They did this to Russia and all their Baltic states in the past 100 years. And our US military are working for them, not us. Speaking of Israel, Nutty is at it again, Nutty asshole, telling the world where their next missile launch is going to take place. And in a UN General Assembly meeting this week, he said the Lebanese group Hezbollah, which is also run by Mossad, just saying, has a secret arms depot in residential Beirut. And he pointed again to a PowerPoint and maps and other visual aids and says, quote, "Here is where the next explosion will take place, right here," Netanyahu said, as he directed his laser pointer at a large screen showing the map of the Lebanese capital. Now, Beirut is still recovering from a huge ammonium nitrate blast caused by Israel, I might add, that occurred at the city's port in early August, killing nearly 200 people, which is a lie, it's way higher than that, wounding thousands and causing massive destruction. Now, the alleged Hezbollah missile depot is situated near both a gas company and people's homes, Netanyahu insisted in his speech, which was broadcast from Jerusalem due to the fake COVID-19 and not the usual UN meeting in New York. He pointed out the next attack. I told you they always tell us. But at which point does the rest of the world stop this shit? And when will America stop being Israel's bitch? Israel again. Now this is a group of women who have been campaigning called Women of the Wall, who have asserted women's rights to pray at the Western Wall in Jerusalem and have struggled against personal violence and public oppression since 1988. Now, though the group is small in number, it has garnered considerable international support, especially for its lengthy struggle in Israel's Supreme Court of Justice, which just happens to be Anunnaki. Now, the latter has expressly recognised the Western Wall as a site of great symbolic significance for Jews in Israel and in the diaspora, not only as a holy place, but also as a historical, national and cultural symbol. The reality is, it's not an historic place for humans. Only the off-world who were stationed there in the past. It's nothing to do with us. And the report says on this historic stage, the struggle between enlightenment and fundamentalism and between patriarchy and feminism is being acted out. Its outcome is important not only for women of the wall themselves, but also for the future of human rights in Israel. WOW's manner of prayer is women's prayer in a group, wearing prayer shawls and reading aloud from the Torah scroll. A manner of prayer customary for men, but not for women, which is a subject of controversy amongst Orthodox Jewish authorities. It is considered by many Orthodox rabbis to infringe prohibitions of Jewish halakhic law, or, even if it does not, to constitute an impermissible deviation from the custom of the place at the Western Wall. So much for the God's chosen people tag. I guess their God was misogynist as well as anti-human. After dismissing 99% of the world as Goyim, where we are declared non-human and beasts. Their God denies women of their own Hebrew Anunnaki off-world religious program as well now. Lilith and Samael, who are both demons and worshipped by the Jewish faith, just smile on at their own stupidity, it seems. Right, next topic is race issues. A bit smaller this week than previous weeks, but some encouraging figures have emerged this week, and the usual stupidity still reigns in some places. Now, a new Associated Press poll finds that there has been a massive 15-point swing, and that most Americans are now hostile to Black Lives Matter protests, all by design. And the poll from the Associated Press for Public Affairs Research finds that 44% of Americans disapprove of protests in response to police violence against Black Americans, while 39% approve. In June, 54% approved. The new survey was conducted September the 11th through 14th, and before Wednesday's announcement that a lone Louisville police officer would be charged in the Taylor case, but not for her actual death. Now, the figures are also interesting when broken down along racial lines. Just 35% of white Americans approve of the protests, which is down from 53% back in June. Latinos, 31% approve, compared with 44% in June. And support for BLM amongst African Americans has also dropped from 81% down to 63%. Big drop. The support for BLM amongst Republicans has also dropped from 29% to 9%. Meanwhile, 70% of Democrats still approve of the protests, while significantly more people on both sides of the political spectrum believe the demonstrations to be mostly or all violent. Now, the survey also finds that belief in the central underpinning narrative pushed by BLM that blacks are being indiscriminately targeted by police is now being eroded, which is exactly how the system wanted it to run. I told you all this when it all started. They're going to use the blacks as a protest, as a distraction, and then get the people to turn against the blacks for wrecking your towns and cities, and the cycle continues. So I'm pleased to see that all colours are now walking away from what's got nothing to do with BLM's narrative at all, and everything to do with divide and conquer and violence programs being ran on we the people by think tanks, agency clowns and mainstream media, including Democrat Party leaders as well. Speaking of Louisville, which is where the Breonna Taylor case took place, which again we covered last week. You know, her boyfriend fired the first shot at the police officer. The media won't tell you that. They just won't. They're running a narrative and a program. But a Louisville university has cancelled all classes following the indictment of a police officer in the death of Breonna Taylor, telling white students to go and educate yourselves on systemic racism. Bellarmine University President Susan Donovan notified her students that classes were dismissed, a decision that was made after the hearing from many of our students of colour and their allies, and in consultation with faculty and student leaderships. Donovan said in a letter later writing, "The white members of our Bellarmine community to educate yourselves on systemic racism, recognise your part in it and work towards inclusion." And she urged her students to continue to channel your feelings into constructive action, such as pushing for police reform and exercising your right to vote for candidates who share your views about the fair and equitable treatment of all people. Oh dear. Do people not see that as actual, blatant racism? This university needs to be defunded until they learn basic common sense and quit running script programs of divide and conquer between the people. And that woman needs to be fired and charged in court for inciting violence. Misogyny could become a criminal offence in England and Wales to protect women. according to a report from the Law Commission. The independent body which is responsible for reviewing laws will look at whether those abusing women because of their gender should have tougher sentences. Currently, the groups and characteristics protected by law include race, religion, sexual orientation, disability and transgender identity. And the Law Commission is calling for evidence from victims of hate crimes, police officers, prosecutors and civil liberties groups, which will be assessed to help establish how misogyny hate crimes could work in practice. Oh dear. Whilst I don't condone that behaviour in any way, shape or form, clear guidelines will be required for this, as it will be open to massive abuse. A bit like the Baker Act. And why do we need laws anyway? Why can't we just be civil to each other? Next category is COVID-related nonsense, fake pandemic. And the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations said on Thursday that the US has created enough troubles for the world already, as the two nations continued to spar over the coronavirus pandemic during a tense meeting of the UN Security Council. And the US representative to the UN, Kelly Craft, criticised China over what she said was a decision to hide the origins of this virus, minimise its danger and suppress scientific cooperation. Let's take a step back a bit, shall we? If China was hiding it, it is because they are a part of the operations with Harvard University, the CIA and Black Dragons involved in creating that operation. Fact. And Kraft claimed Beijing's actions transformed a local epidemic, it wasn't, into a global pandemic. It wasn't either. There's hardly any deaths around the alleged spread of the virus. And China's Zhang Jun swiftly rejected Kraft's characterization of events. Now again, this is not an accurate description. The fake pandemic was created in the EU, not China. It was the media and the European government and clowns who created the pandemic and we're all going to die. And the USA made it into Orwell 1984 on steroids, supported by non-thinking bot people. There was hardly any original event in China. It was contained within 2 weeks and hardly anyone died. That all gets lost in the rhetoric that carries on since. Zhang said, "I must say enough is enough. You have created enough troubles for the world already. Regrettably, we have once again heard noises from the US that are so at odds with the atmosphere of the meeting," and added that Beijing rejected the baseless accusations, and they're correct to do so. Now, the spat came 2 days after Donald Trump used much of his pre-recorded video address to the General Assembly to blame China for the COVID-19 pandemic and for withholding information about the virus. If you wanted to find out about the virus, go and ask Langley and Harvard first, Mr. Trump. Because if we in the alt media knows it, why don't you? Or are you just covering it up? Now on Tuesday, Trump accused Beijing of allowing flights to leave China and infect the world, and referred to COVID-19 as the China virus on Tuesday. But it started in Harvard and various other research labs, one in California. On Thursday, Mr. Zhang said that the US only had itself to blame. Since January, the US has diagnosed more than 6 million. Oh boy, not that figure again. Oh dear me. 6 million coronavirus cases in its population and lost more than 200,000 lives to the illness. What utter rubbish that is. The figures were made up by the CDC and accentuated by the Langley-run Johns Hopkins Centre. Try less than 10,000 who died, and most of them were largely due to prior illness and age, of which certain governors like Cuomo killed a load in New York by sending infected people into care homes. Let's not forget that either. Now, the Russian representative at Thursday's session also criticised Kraft's accusations and said, "We regret the fact that the representative of the United States chose this meeting and the platform of the UN Security Council to make unfounded accusations against one of the members of our council." That was the Russian ambassador, Mr. Nebenzia. Now, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has repeatedly pleaded for unity between member states and warned on Thursday that the relationship between the US and China was moving in a very dangerous direction. Now, this is being implemented in the UK, and it's a heads-up warning to other states or other countries. It's called the 2020 National Security number 973. And the document reads as such: the coronavirus, retention of fingerprints and DNA profiles in the interests of national security. Regulations 2020, which were made at 2:54 p.m. on the 10th of September. It went before Parliament at 4 p.m, 1 hour, 6 minutes later, on the same day, and is coming into force on the 1st of October. Retention of fingerprints and DNA profiles in the interests of national security. But it's funny how not just America, but Britain and many other countries' bills against the people are ran through within a single afternoon or session, and yet tax reforms or stimulus packages for the people take weeks, months, or not at all. Now, the Secretary of State makes the following regulations in exercise of the powers conferred by Section 24, Paragraph 2, 4 and 8 of the Coronavirus Act 2020. And in accordance with the Section 24, Paragraph 3 of the Act, considers that coronavirus is having or is likely to have an adverse effect on the capacity of persons responsible for making national security determinations to consider whether to make or renew national security determinations, and that it is in the interests of national security to retain the fingerprints or DNA profiles as provided for in these regulations. The Secretary of State has consulted the Commissioner for the retention and use of biometric material in accordance with Section 24, paragraph 6 of the Act. In 2, the condition is that the fingerprints or DNA profiles are retained in accordance with a national security determination that will, ignoring the effect of these regulations, cease to have an effect on a date during the period that starts with 1st of October and ends with the 24th of March 2021. That is your second lockdown. Just saying. 6 months plus, they said. But it goes further. In 3, the retention of the fingerprints or DNA profiles under the National Security Determination may continue for a further period of 6 months, starting with the date on which the National Security Determination would otherwise have ceased to affect or ceased to have effect. 2, the first condition is that the fingerprints or DNA profiles are retained. A, under any of the following provisions. The first paragraph of Schedule 8 to the Terrorism Act 2000, Section 18A of the Terrorism Act 2008, and Schedule 6 to the Terrorism Prevention and Investigation Measures Act 2011. And also under the 63F Act of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. If the fingerprints or DNA profiles satisfy the national security retention condition. See Regulation 5. Mentions of why fingerprints or DNA are a national security issue in that whole document is 0. These are the questions people need to ask. Why are fingerprints and DNA a national security issue? Are they going to turn the virus into a terrorist? You may laugh, but these people are that stupid. And bot people just go along with it. So, given that bill, which was made at 2:54 p.m. on September the 10th, and went before Parliament at 4 p.m. on September the 10th, and it's coming into force today. 3 weeks. And then we come to this. House Democrats postponed a vote Wednesday on a $2.2 trillion stimulus bill in the hopes a deal could be reached as negotiations drag on with the White House on a plan to help Americans struggling from the impacts of the coronavirus. The vote was postponed until Thursday to allow non-House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and White House negotiators more time to discuss a potential bipartisan deal, according to a Democratic aide who was unable to discuss internal deliberations publicly. Pelosi and Black Sun Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin met at the Capitol on Wednesday for their first in-person negotiations since August. So they've been arguing over this stimulus bill at least 2 months. Patriot Act didn't take that long, did it? The two sides have been at an impasse for months over the size and scope of a COVID-19 relief bill, but rank-and-file members have pressured congressional leaders to get some sort of relief done by Election Day. course, if they do it before election day, they will see it as Trump giving bribes to the people, and it's going to favour Republicans. And so the American people will miss out until after the election, because the Democrats don't want to see the Republicans in favourable light. What an utter joke. But this is yet another delay in negotiations when it's relevant to giving money to the people. And yet 38 billion of Americans' money goes to Israel with barely a vote on it, or a discussion for that matter. And then our trustee decided that they didn't have enough with 38 billion and tried to send them another 130 million for PPEs. Again, all agreed practically on the spot. And when will Americans wake up to the fact that neither party are fit for purpose in regards to we the people? Here we go again, still on the COVID BS. A test that can diagnose COVID-19 in minutes will dramatically expand the capacity to detect cases in low and middle income countries. Oh my. According to the World Horror Organization. The $5 test could transform tracking of COVID-19 in less wealthy countries which have shortages of healthcare workers and laboratories. So the UK and the US are charging $150 to their residents, yet other countries it's just $5. Okay. And a deal with manufacturers will provide 120 million tests over 6 months. And the WHO's head called it a major milestone. Lengthy gaps between taking a test and receiving the result have hampered many countries' attempts to control the spread of the virus. In some countries with high infection rates, including India and Mexico, experts have said that low testing rates are disguising the true spread of their outbreaks. It's funny they failed to mention that false positive testing figures are disguising the true bullshit of their claims. Funny that, isn't it? Now, the new highly portable and easy to use test will provide results in 20 to 30 minutes instead of hours or days, according to the World Horror Director. Drugs manufacturer Abbott and SD Biocenter have agreed with the charitable Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to produce 120 million of the tests, according to Mr. Tedros. Go figure, and no shit Sherlock. The man who couldn't solve viruses in his own computers is now an expert in medical viruses, and the people don't question this. Bill Gates. And this deal covers 133 countries. You can say bye-bye to many of them, including many in Latin America, which is currently the region's hardest hit by the pandemic in terms of fatality and infection rates. Final piece before the music break is we're going to Australia, and a full-scale update of what life is going on in Melbourne. And I want to say thanks to our THI member for taking the time to do this. I can't put it in every week, but if we get room, we will put it in. And over the last 10 days, he said, we have seen some interesting twists and turns for the fate of Melbourne and its inhabitants. Some liberties have been granted, while others have been taken back. There has been progress on legal matters. There are now 4 cases before the courts that each tackle a different element, not all, of orders by decree of the Premier of Victoria. Enforced curfew, freedom of trade and passage are the 2 lead cases before the courts, and the former is testing the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act 2006, and the latter is testing Section 92 of the Australian Constitution, and that's in the High Court. The first one's in the Supreme Court. Now, after a week of opening arguments for the Supreme Court challenge for the curfew, and on the day before arguments open, after 2 weeks of pre-trial, on Sunday the 27th of September, the Premier, which is their President, announced the removal of the curfew effective at 5 a.m. on the 28th of September. The Victorian Chief Health Officer made reference to the appropriateness of the measure and made reference to the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and the Responsibilities Act of 2006. Now, both cases brought by individuals to the court, so kudos to them both for their efforts. Now, the hotel quarantine inquiry, we covered that when it first happened, and this is an update. It says this inquiry was a significant fixture in the news and pandemic because of contact tracing that has already failed. Claimed that every second wave SARS-CoV-2 case was linked to the botched quarantine of returning travellers and those inbound when the pandemic led to a lockdown of Australian and each state border, and empty city hotels were then turned into camps. Now, this inquiry heard its final witness, which is the Premier of Victoria, last Friday, and after the Premier's testimony under oath, it was clear to everyone that either Premier or all other ministers were lying about the quarantine failures, which was the reason for the inquiry. Now, the Premier then proceeded to blame his Health Minister throughout the proceedings. Let's throw everyone under the bus. And the above-mentioned references by the Victorian CHO highlighted that evidence was withheld from the judicial inquiry by someone, and the Health Minister, who was sold out on Friday, promptly resigned from Parliament on Saturday morning and threw several cats amongst the pigeons. Wonder do pigeons do curiosity? You can always try. And in addition, the contracts and all materials pertaining to the quarantine made their way into the public domain and proved the Health Minister told the truth throughout the last 4 months. And the inquiries into quarantine and identified specifically who knew and via due process who should also know. And what it did, it exposed the underbelly of government, aka the deep state. Now, it is widely understood the Premier is finished along with his party, and so too it may be that rusted on two-party politics is nearing its use-by date too. That two-party politics has not worked in any single country. Now, the police presence. There's been no protests that were organised and none occurred in your traditional form. However, people have taken to writing messages on their masks, for example, #UnlockVictoria. Organised exercise now at 2 hours per day has seen nearly all of Melbourne out and about on the weekends for exercise and food shopping and rendering all local walking trails overcrowded, although no one appears visibly concerned and the smiles have returned. Despite no protests, the riot squad of the Victoria Police and their UN sidearm were out in force as a solution in search of a problem. The 15 to 20 black police vehicles in convoy are very obvious on empty streets. Their air support hasn't helped the situation either. Most police are either over the draconian measures, embarrassed, or simply no longer care. Most police out on the beat are all smiles and will engage is safe. There is a clear drive by the police to rebuild the faith lost in recent weeks, and a recognition that a lot of water must go under the bridge to win the public trust again. There have been fewer helicopters flying overhead and flying at higher altitude, fewer flights from China in the middle of the night, and it's been more than a week since I've seen an F-35 JSF at dusk in the area. When approached by police, the public is sincere but firm in their resolve and challenge every statement that does not make sense. I have witnessed 2 of these exchanges in recent days. The government has gone on a charm offensive. Our Federal Health Minister and new State Health Minister have maintained and engaged public appearances to only discuss the next Health Day or Awareness Week for the past 3 weeks now. I had no idea how many medical special research and fundraising days existed. Then again, this could just be a fundraising by stealth. Our part-time Prime Minister has dropped talk of vaccines and replaced it with talks of cures, be they a vaccine or antiviral drugs, and has highlighted existing legislation that prevents stockpiling of such cures. It didn't take long for the PM to be pushed by mainstream media and the social media about government's stockpiles of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, to name but 2. The government appears close to admitting the planned reversal of the ban of hydroxychloroquine for non-existent ailments, and the federal health authorities announced that their research had identified that people who suffered from dengue fever had little to no chance of catching SARS-CoV-2. The social media was quick to point out that the hydroxychloroquine, in combination with other over-the-counter medications, did cure dengue fever and left the patient's immune system primed to handle a SARS-CoV-2 infection, for example. So what is the word out on the street? Well, people are now able to congregate in small numbers, which is turning into medium-sized groups, and I've overheard all manner of conversations, and here are a few. A, it's those people in the shadows who want to give us the New World Order. B, everything has a 13 in it. The 13th star sign is. C, I guess they've been listening to our show. I am never voting for a major party again. D, why can I now go to the local pool and swim and yet I can't play golf? E, do you know anyone who is tested positive? I don't. F, who cares about the count of cases? It's total BS and a hoax. Get on board, mate. G, you should go and read up at the coviddoctorsnetwork.com because you sound so stupid saying that. So there are some of the comments out on the street now. And the COVID mortality has been from nursing homes for all 800 deaths except 15. And but for about 20 were all over the age of 70, and that leaves many annoyed. The 10,000 Australian dollar payments and doctors having their death certificates falsified has had a few laps of talkback radio too. Doctors were getting $10,000 payments for declaring death certificates with COVID-19 on it. And he said Melbourne might just be waking up as a village yet when the Premier mentioned his fear of a third wave coming at a recent press conference it was met by laughter by the journalists and not taken seriously by anyone. Businesses have started preparing for an opening, and the air is no longer feeling heavy. Spring has finally sprung, and it's onward and upward from here. Great stuff, and thanks to our THI resident on the ground in Melbourne for that update. We'll be back shortly. The land down under. Yeah, thanks to Ashley for that report. You know, sometimes you get reports from different places around the world. I don't always get a chance to fit it in, but when we can, we will. You're going to laugh at this. Well, it turns out there was a genuine plan in place to defend the United States in the event of a zombie apocalypse. Where's the plan to defend from bot apocalypse, one might ask? Now, the destruction of mankind at the hands of a contagious zombie virus is a scenario that is played out time and time again in movies, books and TV shows. But what if it were actually to happen for real, according to this article? And it said it might seem like a scenario that the US government would never take seriously, but in actual fact there does exist a zombie apocalypse defense plan, albeit one that even admits that such a thing is never likely to actually happen in reality. And it's known as CONOP 8888. CONOP. And it's the official zombie preparedness plan, and includes a disclaimer noting that it was not actually designed as a joke, and that the strategies outlined are the real deal. But rest assured, it's nothing to do with our resident cap-fine treasurer person, Mr. Lee CONOP, spelled with a K. Now, this was written back in 2011 by, they say, junior military officers at the US Strategic Command as a training exercise. We've all heard what happens when training exercises are undertaken. That tasked them with presenting a general invasion contingency plan, and the resulting 31-page document includes many of the concepts you might expect to find in such a plan, especially if you are a fan of zombie apocalypse movies. And what was interesting is the seriousness of the presentation, despite the inclusion of fantastical concepts such as, quote, evil magic zombies. Oh dear. And they're real. Quote, space zombies. Oh dear. And they're real. And other bizarre theoretical subcategories. It's clear that the plan was never intended to be taken literally, according to the article, as far as zombies are concerned anyway, and serves more as a general template for an invasion scenario. Project Bluebeam, anyone? Well, unknown to this article writer and few outside of THI, the zombie virus program was supposed to roll out in 2017 under the Zika virus guideline. It failed. British astrophysicist Piers Corbyn has made a claim this week that has been stated on this show for a while. We are plunging now into a deep mini ice age and there's no way out. And he said for the next 20 years it's going to get colder and colder on average, according to Corbyn, who holds a BSc in physics and an MSc in astrophysics. He said the jet stream will be wilder. There will be more wild temperature changes, more hail events, more earthquakes, more extreme volcano events, more snow in winters, lousy summers, late springs, short autumns, and more crop failures. The fact is the sun rules the sea temperature and the sea temperature rules the climate, he said. A shutting down of the Gulf Stream will lead to cold Arctic-like conditions invading Western Europe almost overnight, and with Britain, Ireland and Scandinavia at the forefront of the blast. And he said, what we have happening now is the start of the mini ice age. It began around 2013. It's a slow start, but now the rate of moving into mini ice age is accelerating. And he said the cold times are returning and the mid-latitudes are refreezing in line with historically low solar activity, cloud nucleating cosmic rays, and meridional jet stream flow. Both NOAA and NASA appear to agree. And if you read between the lines, with NOAA saying we're entering a full-blown grand solar minimum in the late 2020s, and NASA seeing this upcoming solar cycle as the weakest of the past 200 years, with the agency correlating previous solar shutdowns to prolonged periods of global cooling here. The Russians told you all of this back in 1959. And you all went off with your opposite programme of global warming. Jackasses. A video was posted that was taken in Israel and posted to the Jewish-run Facebook, and was declared not acceptable today. And so what were they covering up? Well, the Jewish have a day of atonement where they pass all their karma and sins onto the Goyim, as we are known. Yes, you heard that right. The Day of Atonement is where they pass their karma and sin all onto the Goyim. They did sacrifices in the streets, this time with animals, behind closed doors, and the higher-ups in that field, they're sacrificing humans. They've done it for thousands of years. They did it in King Solomon Temple and Herod as well. Now the ceremony in public view in the middle of the town involved them all, including children, to rip wings off live chickens, and all in the public view. The complete disregard for life these people show on this world is beyond staggering, all to appease their fake and frankly evil god or gods. Short piece before we go into a much longer piece and a music break again. With reports of THI members being blocked from joining Life Force has now increased quite a bit, I'm hearing. But if we're going to go along with apps, how about an app that deletes all CIA, NSA, GoOgle, Microsoft and data collections? That would be a useful app. Perhaps we can find a developer for that. All apps otherwise are part of the Robert David Steele plan to harvest all data and get machines to analyse and target all people. He, Robert David Steele, said the people will become the intelligence. Go and listen to Clowns in Panic again. And he asked for billions of dollars to give everyone on the planet a free phone. So they become the data and the intelligence. And the Life Force app, whilst blocking THI members, is actually playing into the Robert David Steele OSS NATO hands. This song next says, "To hold your breath, I feel it coming." It is after this song. Right, here goes. I never thought I would ever write a piece like this. And before I go into this piece, I need to make it clear this is not an attack. It is constructive criticism and in essence an audit against claims being made. It will no doubt elicit much response, as I will be labelled the bad guy for pointing out either the failure of others, breaking hopium spells, fake reports, misleading information, divide and conquer tactics, mainstream media sensational headlines of it all happening this coming Monday or the latest Tuesday, silence within the week, unless the host does a "we need donations" call, and then another repeat and rinse the next weekend, with a different theme and zero addressing of why the previous weekend didn't happen. I have always said that if I thought people were not operating for or in the best for we the people, I would call it out. And Life Force and Kim are no different to anybody else. For the record, and I will repeat again, I want Kim to succeed as the trustee and Eve. But I did tell her it was not a good idea her going public, and I gave her valid reasons to protect her as to why before the split. I want the TV channel to work 100%, as it is exactly what I said we needed back in 2013 and since, given so much of the alt media is corrupted. You all see it now. Perhaps not so much when I first outed it 5 years ago. And I don't particularly care if that TV channel didn't or doesn't include me. I really don't. I've come up with other solutions that all appear to be status elevating, and yet I wanted others to do it, not me. Remember the military courts as one example. I picked John Darash and National Liberty Alliance and Carl Appel. Why? Because they are better placed to understand it, and even included Anna von Reitz. The business team and subsequent TPC3 video I gave to Alan James to do, because they are more business minded than I, despite me running a successful business of my own for 25 years. So if people think I'm pissed about not being in Life Force, that is a wrong assumption. Some will say it is because of the split, which she engineered all by herself, that I'm now criticising her. But I would not have agreed with numbers of the decisions Kim has taken in the near past 5 to 6 months either, and so it's no different and not personal. It was Kim's idea only to split from THI and divide our community and go on a different path. The only difference now is, once it was private and now it is public. But Kim herself made it public with her own statements. Remember, I said nothing of the split for 5 weeks. And she also went public with her show, proclaiming about not having a relationship with me when nobody suggested that that was the case, and so I'm not sure why she had to state that. And the Bill Clinton-esque statements did not make a good look for the trustee or the Eve. Her show is to be treated no different from any other alt media show now, except they make more claims than any other group on the internet. And to date, their record is 0 out of 14. That is not a good look for them. And because it's 0 out of 14, it's not a good look for me or we the people either. Yes, you heard that right. Their mishandling is not good for me or the people. It needs to work and work properly. And this was our biggest chance to end the clowns and their regime. And decisions since March made by the trustee is jeopardising that for all to see currently. So people can snap at me, blame me, use me as the bad guy. But I've kept largely quiet and watched a disaster unfold that is damaging to us all. But after podcasts done by them this week, enough is enough. There is a common theme running through this piece, and I hope all, including Kim and her group, take a long, hard look at it, because it needs to be corrected if the damage of the last 6 months is to be pulled back on track. Kim's latest was like a rerun of several THI shows this week, albeit with wrong placed information. Riddled with THI themes, and yet we remained a maligned group. Unless Kim feels she can use some of our members for brownie points. But it raised several inconsistencies and mixed messages within that speech, which I will address to not attack her, but to get her to see where the problem lies. All people make mistakes. The key is to correct them, not mask them and hope they all go away. They don't. In fact, they get worse. I warned everyone 4 years ago, the masks come down and people are going to see. And we are. And so the cover-up leads to lies. And them lies have to be maintained. But then another event comes forward that contradicts the previous subset of information. And at some point, honesty is the only way forward. Because in this case, it has got 1,000 times worse than the original problem. She spoke about a 9/11, and it was all about to happen again. But this time it's global and real, and billions to die, she proclaimed, and then wheeled out the classic mainstream media or Hollywood movie trailer style delivery of statements with no supporting information, and then said, "Stay tuned for our next broadcast," is again not a good look. All this after promising this channel would not be like the mainstream media. It is, and worse. That podcast has put people in fear, Kim. And if you're going to out that level of dire statements, you do not keep people hanging like that. And it is, again, inconsiderate of the emotions of the people. Cliffhanging and trailers are of the Hollywood mould, generating interest to garner more listeners or viewers. This is not what we want or need in the alt media. It's piss poor grandstanding, and it fails to take into account the emotions you have caused to the people who listened to that caveat. One suspects these constant flow of sensational events each week now on their show is a deflection against the promises made in the previous shows not coming to fruition, and a total failure to address it each week of why the previous week's promises or predictions all failed. That, again, is not a good look for a new channel, and less so for Kim's standing. Now, how the channel looks does not really concern me, but Kim's standing does. And someone has to tell her things are not going well or right, and the yes people over there are not helping her currently. She stated in this podcast that we are all responsible to fix it, which I agree with on point, but that is contrary to everything else that has been stated by her in the last 5 months, with constant references of me, myself and I, the now 4 titles, plus the highest security clearance, and how I don't need anybody else, I'm doing it all alone. And now there's an alleged crisis, and suddenly she passes all the responsibility onto the listeners to fix it. Then we got the religious aspect thrown into the mix. The solution to fixing we're all going to die problem is to pray. Is it P-R-A-Y or P-R-E-Y? Neither are good. But what type of leadership is that? Because if praying fixed anything, billions would not have died in the past 100 years alone. She then goes on to state that Tank is the leader of the rebellion, according to Kim via the Project Looking Glass. I will leave my opinion out of that. But many people are aghast at that statement, inside and outside of THI. And they're all asking, is it a sign that Kim is not either being truthful, grandstanding, or has lost the plot? And I will repeat again, they're others' words, not mine. Some things are best left unspoken, and with the rhetoric and dire warnings that followed in that show, one has to wonder why it was even mentioned in this podcast. And what the people are thinking is, it is another of your now long list of jabs against me. Making comparisons between me and Tank. That is what they're thinking, Kim. And it's all very, our show is better than yours. Like I said, they're thinking I'm relaying, not mine. Speaking of Tank, he was talking of the GCR again. And now we know why he flew to Reno, Nevada again recently, as Reno is the home of the RV payout game. Is Lifeforce UNC now running a new RV program? Question mark. Not a statement. Again, he gave more promises yesterday and again requested more funds from listeners. This is becoming like a church begging bowl. Where are these funds going to? And where is the $25,000 of members' donation for Lawful America that Tank took out the bank, I'm told? Where has all that gone to? I know exactly what the latest requests for funds are, Tank, and what they're for. I see patterns. And quit asking people to show me the money in a background of fear-based rhetoric again, or I will out the reason why. So in his podcast yesterday, where was an update or an acknowledgement of our call to action on the adrenochrome issue the night before, Tank? Is that something else that will be brushed away and hope people forget it? Or doesn't it count because it came from the so-called enemy group? Tank also reiterated that Kim had taken out the top end of the Roths and Black Sun and the black nobility, and one hopes there's no backtracking on that news item, like she did with a previous statement of 768,000 Black Sun members are dead, only to backtrack on it in an attempt to discredit me and THI. You all heard it. But with all the top end of the lower end people, I want to repeat that again so people hear it quite closely. With all the top end of the lower end people, because all the real top end were deleted 5-6 years ago now, are now gone. And Kim is in charge as ground commander of them now. I expect instant or imminent changes on a daily basis now. And no, I'm not being unfair with that statement either. With leaders all gone, as she now claims, there is no one left to run the programs except minions, which she now controls. Kim states trust our apps. Tank stated they were hacked. I stated that was proof apps were not safe, and then Tank goes on the next show and states it wasn't hacked, that he just got the password wrong. Pull the other one, Tank, it's got balls on. Now yesterday he says they're hacked again. So which is it to be, Tank? But then he says, trust our apps. Which is just about as shallow as trust the plan and Q. And remember, Lifeforce came in with a Trump and Q sales pitch. We're going to be getting Q drops and White House passes. Where did they go, Tank? You, Tank, are there to protect and make sure Kim is safe, in good hands, and quite frankly, you have spectacularly failed to do so. You have no reputation to lose. You don't have one, but Kim does. And the haphazard, shambolic way you have ran this show for Kim has damaged her more than people realise. Although her input is not exactly helping either. You may get away with saying wrong information with your followers, politicians or world leaders, but not THI listeners. And this is not about an internet show. It has far wider implications, and as for your statement of the now UNC was on the looking glass tech, do you really expect people to take you seriously with that? Because that, like the rebellion man, are pure ego statements and not conducive to we the people. It gets more embarrassing each episode of failed promises, both of them talking about varying stuff and getting it consistently wrong information, because neither of them were the origin of that information, and they are winging it, just not very well. It's not a good look. I wished it would be better than this, but clearly it's not, and somebody has to say something. Kim spoke last week of not speaking to heads of state anymore. Then this week she is hectic because I've spoken to many heads of state. Some consistency would be nice. Then we had the part about the White House end user and purchaser of all the minerals, the in-ground minerals. But Kim has previously stated that the trust owned all of it in-ground anyway. So why would the trust purchase minerals it already owns? We would like some clarity. Kim claimed some deal on this was going to take place and that it's happening Monday. And again, this is about the 4th or 5th Monday or Tuesday of promises now. Student loans, Trump announcements, biomachine announcements, Israeli money, Mexico money, and now this. Again, that's not a critique. These claims and promises you are making each week are damaging your credibility and making her look like a liar. And at which point will she see that? As of today, we have heard nothing as to whether the latest deal that was happening Monday took place. My opinion is it was just to spin Kim's wheels again. And the clowns have been doing this to Kim for the past 2 years. I kept telling her to not engage these people and gave her several alternative solutions, all of which were ignored. And the people she speaks with are mostly just plugging her for information, wasting her time, and delaying the progress that we had made. I gave her a 12-point plan to fix that in March. To date, she has ignored that as well. Kim went on about food shortage, and I'm really pleased she mentioned that. But I warned her of this issue in spring of last year and did a show on it. And the question is, why has it taken her 18 months to recognise a problem the team had warned her of? Kim then spoke of and was warning about the digital world. Oh my. and yet I got flack only recently and accused of attacking them for mentioning about her digital wallet program and also the digital apps. Thomas is always attacking me, she proclaims. No, it was warning you about going down certain paths that would come back to bite you. It did, and it has. Kim called for people to do homework this week on the role of communism. Really? This again was covered comprehensively and extensively by our From Russia with Love series. Why didn't she reference that? And again, I kept telling her about Trump and his links to the real group behind communism, the Zionists, and their connections under the banner of Jewish. Are we seeing a pattern yet? Kim recently stated that Trump is a good guy, but he is a Black Sun member. How long has she known this, and why did she expect he would follow through for we the people? Now, Kim then launched into a full-on attack mode on Mr. Trump, which I thought was good, stating his actions are not good enough and he is now not fit for purpose. Finally, Kim, you see what I warned you of back in 2016 and several times since. This is not about me being right. Most times I'm right. I wish I was wrong. And it's about being able to listen to people and take appropriate actions. That way it becomes a team-based decision, not a one-person roadshow. Because when that roadshow falls short, and it has, only you, Kim, then end up getting the flack. Because you were the one who told everyone it was all about you. You were setting yourself up. I could see it, and so could others. And this is what you don't get. You are setting yourself up to get abuse and blame with all these one-person claims. And for the record, I, for one, do not wish to see you get that abuse and or blame. Because in case you forgot, I was your firewall to avoid all that for the past 4+ years. I think it's great to see and hear Kim finally call out Trump. But the question remains is, who funded Trump, Kim? Who funded the Fed in March, Kim? These questions remain unanswered, and so it creates doubts that were not prevalent prior to May. Other people are now suggesting that things have got progressively worse since April-May time, as time and events rack up. And at which point does that become indicative, Kim? And at some point, Kim has to listen to people who are advising her and actually take that advice on board, not ignore it, and then we all pay a heavier cost later down the line. To all intents and purposes, it appears now that Trump has been playing it like a fiddle, which I stated in a long conversation with Kim about plans in December 2018. I would love to be proven wrong on Trump, but evidence to this point leans otherwise. And we cannot just take it for granted and sit back and trust a plan that nobody has the slightest idea what the plan is. Because if the highest national security clearance person on the planet doesn't know what the plan is, who else does? We're tired of weight clubs. Weight clubs means more deaths. But you, Kim, have done many, many wonderful things, and that should not be forgotten. And it's not by me or THI members. But you have to take the rough with the smooth. You have to treat the critiques and plaudits in near equal as measure as possible. Not rail at people for having the audacity to ask a question, and then cast them out like last week's trash, all for pulling a face. And because you have set it all up as a one-person roadshow with all these titles, you have left yourself stretched and open to being attacked. That was not the case prior to May. You know it, I know it, and the listeners see and know it also. You may be angry now, Kim, but you ignored all the signs given to you by people who did everything for you to succeed. And as you are the leader of several titles, you have to take a large degree of responsibility for the current global mess. And again, I'm not saying that as an attack, because what I say is actually the truth. You can't have all these titles and responsibility and dissolve it onto everybody else. And it's far from only my opinion either. Way far from only my opinion. As much as you would like to make it seem like that, it's just not. I may be the one to fire the gun, but there are many, many others who load the bullets, Kim. And you need to come clean on things that have been done by you, said by you, that has both gone wrong or backfired. It will not be me or us who face the consequences, Kim. It will be you. You are the holder of all the titles, and you who will single-handedly carry the can if it all fails. This is what I was warning you about, not attacking you like third-party people said. You stated last week, willful ignorance is a crime, you said. And yet there is a number of major issues that you ignored from your own team. And that should be recognised, accepted, addressed, to be able to move forward. You stated, all on this call are welcome and must take part. And I mean all, you said. Except that does not include myself, who in your words was the team and the THI members. That comes across as a tad contradictory, does it not? and yet again does not make you look good in the public's eye. Only last week, 2 good people out of THI travelled 4,200 miles round trip and 70 hours of driving at their own cost to attempt to do a mediation with me that you, Kim, agreed to, and then blocked it when they got here. That was disgraceful and shameful in equal measure. A 4,200 mile round trip. That trip coincided with the death of my father, and you, Kim, did not even have the common decency to send condolences, and was aghast at the mere suggestion of it. That is not the behaviour of a trustee, an ambassador for Earth, and certainly not the behaviour of a supposed Eve. It's more Lilith-like than Eve. The reality is you're lucky I even wanted to try and speak with you after what you said and have done since May the 4th. But I agreed because I see a bigger picture here that goes beyond personalities. But that does not encourage trust, integrity or unity. That equals divide and conquer and is more in tune with Marduk tactics than the new trustee. You asked for a network, or pleaded for a network on this call. We at THI had already built that up, with Randy Morgans, Jimmy Brent, Alan James, state groups, country groups, and you were directly responsible for those breakups within those groups. You have to take and accept some responsibility here before you start asking people to come together, largely because some of your own actions have now gone wrong. Passing the responsibility now, as you did in the last show, onto all the people, when it was your actions and decisions that were responsible for the current mess, is just not a good look. All people make mistakes, Kim. They are lessons to learn for us all. They are not situations to cover up and turn what was a small mound in the grass last May into the giant sinkhole it is now. There's only one person in the sinkhole, Kim, and it's not me. We had them, the clowns, over a barrel, and we were strangling them out of the game up until May. You said so yourself on the Zoom call in late April. And look at what has happened since, all under your solitary watch. This is not about you saving face, winning a personal battle that only exists in your mind. This is about the whole of humanity. Inadvertently, you have sent my reputation through the roof since May, when the object for the past 4 years was to send your reputation through the roof, not mine. I don't need a reputation. I'm not the one with the titles. You did. And that is why I never proclaimed much of my role in it. It was you who outed what I had done on the Christmas and April call, not me. and then accuse me, along with Alan James of Circle of White Light, of having an ego problem. I'm sure our members will roar with laughter with that statement. Ego people proclaim and shout their own input from the rooftops. I never. But that, it seems, is overlooked when agendas apply. I have much respect for all you have done, Kim, and I wish you well in the future. And you can carry on designating this as an attack, but a clear head will see it as constructive criticism, and actually the goal was to help you, not attack you. If I really wanted to attack you, I would have just have to stay quiet, say nothing. As with the things being said and unfolding on the Lifeforce and UNC channel, you are running yourself down and damaging your reputation with your own words and actions each week. So I could just say nothing and just let you carry on hanging yourself with contradictions and sensationalised claims each week that zero to date have come to fruition. But there's a bigger picture here beyond the Kim and Lifeforce Roadshow, and that is my main and only concern. And I'm asking you, Kim, to remember the two things from March and April this year. One, the 12-point plan I gave you, and two, the incident in the car in April where you were ultra critical of yourself. Really ultra critical of yourself. Why was that? And perhaps this piece today will help you. I never imagined I would write this piece ever. But these are the times we live in, and people going off track. And some really bad deeds have been done and said against me and THI by you and your group since May, mostly behind the scenes, that quite frankly makes a mockery of your claim that we must all come together. And to the people who hear this, you have no idea of how much flack I've taken behind the scenes, all underhandedly via Tank, Ava in a roundabout way, and Kim plus others, and by and large kept quiet. The biggest sadness to me was seeing you, Kim, at minute 48 in your September 6th show. The look of sadness, broken and haunted, was a far cry from the glowing person that shone right through our Zoom call in April. A far cry. The difference has been noted by me and many others inside and also outside of the alt media who know you well. At which point do you recognise this as an issue and a problem and address it? At the end of the day, some honesty and truth-telling is required here, Kim, in full. And only then can unity and the people really coming together can have a chance to prosper. And that, as the eve, starts and ends with you. I hope with that piece in some way brings more clarity to the situation. I would have hoped to have never ever done a piece like that. But sometimes there's a word called tough love. You can carry on bullshitting people and watching them sink, or you can tell them the truth and be accused of being a bad guy or an attacker. I can handle that. There is much more I could have said that would have been even more damaging to their cause, but I've chosen not to. And the fact I said their cause and not our cause is the most damaging aspect on a wider aspect that transcends THI or Life Force and is about we the people, not popularity contests. I've said all along, this is not about me. This is our group, not my group. The People's Club is what it says. It belongs to the people. All the people, including Life Force members. But this division created by Kim and Tank, as he's been doing it for the past 2 years for his own ego ends, has to stop. United we stand, divided we fall. It is the season of fall, but due to poor decisions made in the last 6 months, this fall was supposed to be the clown's fall. And now it looks like the people's. And Kim has to take all the responsibility for that. Should this piece not lead to a resolving of issues? Admins are considering given the volume of jabs at myself, THI, and the blocking of our members joining Life Force, a total ban on any Life Force, UNC or Speak project posts on our page. No one has been blocked from our group. Kim is still in MeWe and Ava is still in Facebook. But these posts are being used to create discordant energies within our group and is becoming increasingly fractious within our group that we don't need at this point for what is best for our members. Should that step be taken, you will all be notified by a post and their posts will be deleted automatically. If you live by the sword, you end up dying by the sword. A sword can defend or cut you. But if your sword is rigid and stuck, the sword then can only cut you. It cannot defend. And with that all said, hopefully we can all now move on. I said time would tell. It has. Does that please me? I was right. The answer is emphatically no. I wished it was all different. And despite the very poor words and actions by Kim against me on May the 4th, I have tried 4 times to make peace when many others wouldn't have given her behaviour. And 4 times she trampled all over that peace. I stand by all what I've said, and that was also on behalf of many, many others who have written to me or sent messages or emails. And I have proof for most of what was said. A recent conversation on the chat I thought I would bring to a wider audience on the show. And the gist of the debate is we should all share energy or energies. But the question back was, what type of energy are you sharing? Have you considered when people are sharing energies, the quality of that energy? Is it for your greater good? Have you defined what is your space and your field when considering sharing energies? Have you cleared your space and field and defined what energies you allow in? And these are important things to consider when consenting to the sharing of energies. Why? Do you understand the term harvesting? And 99% have shared their energies with the 1%, and they harvested it all. And so with that said, it is kind of naive to suggest it's just about sharing energies. The key to THI listeners is to protect your energies, not share it with a bulk of humanity who harvest it. One of the things we have done at THI is highlight how we think and how we relate things. And are we in danger of consenting to things with how we speak that we may not be recognizable at the first go? We have had to counter many New Age and Wiccan speak that crept into alt media circles in vast volumes as well. And the key was, have you defined energies or the sharing of it? And wafting words about like energies and consciousness is often New Age speak without the clear definition, and there is a difference. And what I'm trying to get across, and I'm asking, is for you all to define the sharing of energies. Tuesday's harrowing show about the children brought this discussion to full clarity. The children subjected to adrenochrome harvesting that can be perceived as just sharing their energy. Is that acceptable? That is being in the action, and their action of harvesting our energy, is it not? My question then is, you cannot just share the energy, can you, without defining it? And non-defining has caused untold damage to all humans here. All of us, including me, have not defined enough of our words. And a frittering use and application of our energy has yielded big harvesting. Not understanding our own energy life force equals harvesting. But then we bring in a THI meme of observe, not absorb. You observe the dark energy, dark magicians, dark forces and jinns, not absorb them. Absorbing them equals energy sharing and a fall from grace and harvesting. The lesson is you are responsible for your own fields and energies. Only you share energies in minimal circumstances with people you actually know and trust. Our abilities to read people and their intentions is often in the poor to average range. And that is why you must look after your own energies before considering others. The Abraxans, Draco, Mantid and Greys knew the importance of our energy, and they revealed it in Jupiter Ascending. After that movie, and if you've seen it, ignorance became a choice that was your responsibility. Remember, a soul journey is not a groupthink exercise, but a personal journey only. And the final song is a question for all people to ponder on. Myself, all the listeners, Kim, Tank, and anybody else.